request that we feel was unreasonable and cold-hearted. Essentially, the movie has been taken unjustly from Justin as director and essentially from Wayfarer's control due to the extortion of Blake Lively. This is truly insanity. Words from Sony. Sony's in agreement. She did it to herself. Epic level stupid what she did.
The words left her mouth, written in her own hand, intended to save her career. Instead, Blake Lively's unsealed letter just blew up her entire case, a self-inflicted wound that shocked Hollywood. This wasn't a leak or a calculated spin. It was her testimony, signed and submitted, meant to prove she was a powerless victim. But what it revealed was operational dominance across every single act of a studio film. Sony executives themselves were stunned, their private communications filled with disbelief, calling her actions insane and epic-level stupid. This document, once a plea, transformed into an exhibit, sealing her fate with every boastful detail.
Without the official title of producer, my hands were tied. I couldn't apply when I wanted to. No crew could tick me in the box of producers who could receive the tag. When pulled, I'm pleading now because I'm confident with all of my soul that if you saw what I did on this film, you would agree that this mark is without question deserved.
She claimed mistreatment, sidelined, and stripped of authority. Yet, within the very same letter, Blake Lively meticulously detailed her absolute control over development, casting, script rewrites, and even the film's entire production design. She dictated scheduling, oversaw post-production, orchestrated marketing strategy, and coordinated distribution. The stark contrast wasn't subtle. It was a total collapse of her victim narrative. How could someone with no power run every single department on a major studio release? This glaring contradiction left Hollywood insiders scratching their heads, instantly noticing the damage this self-declaration caused.
I just can't believe the hubris and ego of this woman to think she could get away with this when she wrote specifically this letter to the Producers Guild of America.
Victims don't submit documents bragging about their operational dominance. People who are allegedly pushed aside do not outline daily decision-making authority across an entire production pipeline. Those claiming to be ignored don't describe themselves as the final word on creative, logistical, and marketing outcomes. Her own account painted a picture of someone everywhere, in everything, all the time. The obvious question writes itself. If her hands were tied and she was powerless, how did she manage to pull every single string? The narrative wasn't just collapsing, it was imploding under the weight of her own detailed claims.
We have agreed to write this letter due to feeling trapped. She continues to hold a threat over our heads every time we try and hold a line. She uses that threat, either indirectly or directly, to get us to fold.
While public statements remained diplomatic, Sony's internal texts and emails painted a vastly different, far more damning picture. Executives didn't sound intimidated, they sounded absolutely stunned. The word insane appeared more than once, with disbelief echoing everywhere. The prevailing tone was not fear, but rather incredulity that they had caved to her demands at all. There was no real pressure from her influence, only annoyance at being boxed in by optics rather than truth. Sony merely tolerated the situation, never truly submitting to what they privately considered outrageous demands.
I think this is Ange writing back, and Sanford's like, no, disagree. She's done for, at least for a while. It's cooked. She said she's retiring to Josh or something. It will take a few years, Eva Mendes time. She did it to herself.
Epic level stupid. That's how Sony privately described Blake Lively's actions. The internal consensus was clear, she did this to herself. If she had simply allowed the director to come to the premiere, if she hadn't manipulated the cast to follow him, or tried to kick him off the movie, none of this sleuthing would have happened. She wouldn't listen, convinced she knew better, a certainty that Sony found astonishing. Companies do not mock individuals who hold power over them. They certainly don't ridicule alleged abusers behind closed doors, or privately question concessions made out of genuine fear.
She did it to herself. If she just let him come to the premiere or didn't make all the cast and follow him or kick him off the movie and did what everyone else has done in the show business for time immemorial, which is protect the show, then none of the sleuthing would have happened. The hair sell at the same time was epic level stupid. She wouldn't listen. She knows better. Astonishing 150. Anyway.
And then came the most damaging phrase imaginable during active litigation: "I did everything." This wasn't a defense, it was a devastating confession. By proudly claiming control over development, pre-production, actual production, post-production, and marketing, she single-handedly obliterated any argument that she was sidelined or powerless. She had unwittingly positioned herself not as an exploited participant, but as the central, all-encompassing authority figure. Her own words, intended to prove her worth, became irrefutable evidence against her, handing the opposition a clear, undeniable case.
Even Sony, Sanford Panach admits here, I can't believe they caved on the producer credit for her. This is Sony admitting it in private. I can't believe it. She wants to change credits, all the order of production, her second position, moving to Jamie's. She wants to move the order of production of producers now. And Sony's just ridiculous. This is crazy.
The letter detailed her pervasive involvement even before cameras rolled. She personally led the location shift, identified and onboarded freelance team members, and reviewed and reshaped the creative and production design for all key locations and characters. Blake Lively made changes to utilize existing elements, called in favors with home design contacts, and reshaped creative props and florals by personally outreach to florists on Instagram. She even meticulously went through hundreds of casting tapes to help find the ideal cast. This was not the work of a sidelined actor, it was a full-scale studio executive's job.
Here we go. Here's what she did, guys. Here's what she's admitting she did. Development, pre-production, I led the location shift, I identified onboard freelance team members, I reviewed, reshaped the creative and production design for all key locations, for all characters, made changes to use existing elements, I called in favors with home design guys, reshaped creatives, I reshaped the creative prop and floral design, I outreached to florists on Instagram, I went through hundreds of casting tapes to help.
Her direct claims continued. I rewrote the script to improve on the role of Jenny Bloom after 3 actors turned it down. This wasn't just a minor tweak, it was a full-blown creative overhaul, and it didn't stop there. She managed the politics and HR concerns on a daily basis, acting as an interim HR to keep crew and cast engaged, safe, and on board. She blocked scenes, helped budget, and broke schedules. Essentially, Blake Lively admitted to being head of human resources, a writer, and a logistical coordinator, all while claiming she lacked fundamental control. The contradictions multiplied with every line.
No one asked you to! Sony didn't want you to, nobody did. In fact, Justin's version tested better. It did, and you said you didn't care. So, but we're supposed to boo-hoo this shit. And it just keeps going. How she worked with all her editors. Look at this. And then it's not done. She also was in charge.
Her letter didn't just stop at production, it dove deep into marketing, revealing another shocking layer of her alleged control. She described directing trailers, personally approving copy, deciding the cadence of releases, choosing color palettes, shaping fonts, and guiding international rollout decisions. This was not mere collaboration or input. This was total control. It begged the critical question: if Blake Lively was making all these decisions, what exactly was Sony's marketing department doing? Her detailed admissions dismantled any argument that she was a passive participant in the film's promotional strategy.
Made changes to use existing elements, I called in favors with home design guys, reshaped creatives, I reshaped the creative prop and floral design, I outreached to florists on Instagram, I went through hundreds of casting tapes to help find the cast, and apparently including all of them. I rewrote the script to improve on the role of Jenny Bloom after 3 actors turned it down. I personally identified and put forth this actress. I worked with my agents. This is just pre-production. This is before the movie's even begun. I rewrote the script more.
Blake Lively further claimed, I was the director's partner in all creative and realistic concerns, helping to see the best outcome for the film. She stated she would push back when needed, support when needed, always prioritizing the film. But Sony's private internal communications, alongside the director's own cut testing better, revealed this wasn't an asked-for partnership. This was her version of the film, taking top priority, a self-appointed leadership role that directly contradicted her later blame shifting. She couldn't criticize the studio's marketing decisions while simultaneously claiming to be their architect.
That's all before production. And then she continues. I broke the scheduled budget. I did this. I helped block. I blocked. I rewrote. I managed the politics and HR concerns on a daily basis, acting as an intermediary to keep crew and cast engaged, safe, and on board. So she was head of HR! She's admitting it!
The PGA credit, the Producers Guild mark, is not a vanity badge. It's a formal certification confirming a producer performs substantive, hands-on duties. It carries significant weight, impacting awards eligibility and industry standing. That's precisely why late-stage pressure to obtain it violates industry norms. Multiple producers submitted letters supporting her publicly, yet privately. They admitted feeling trapped and pressured. This wasn't an endorsement, it was direct. When support letters are paired with private communications describing coercion, the term recognition no longer applies. It becomes a clear case of forced compliance.
So she was head of HR! She's admitting it! Like, what? I shot this to the director DP first day and not usually all at once, but when not just when it was asked for. On round 2 of the film, we shot half. I would speak to our first AD every day for nearly an hour on my drive home.
Sony understood the immense risks immediately. Misrepresenting facts to the PGA could lead to revocation of the credit. Revocation would damage reputations, and that damage would trigger scrutiny of everything else connected to the project. The paper trail she created was what truly terrified them, not the director or the press. Once those documents surfaced and became evidence, the panic shifted from managing public optics to dealing with undeniable exposure. This was the precise moment her entire strategy failed. Silence stopped working, and the difference between her narrative and the documented record became impossible to conceal.
Poor guy. I was the director's partner in all creative and logistic. I was the director's partner in all creative and logistic concerns, helping to execute the best outcome for the film. Were you asked to do that, or you just forced yourself to do that? I would push back when needed. I would support when needed. The film and was always my top priority. Your version of the film was the top priority.
Every attempt to spin the story now ran headfirst into sworn statements and internal correspondence. This ceased being a public opinion fight and transformed into an insurmountable documentation problem. Documents do not forget. They do not sympathize. They do not bend. They simply wait for courtrooms, timelines, and consequences to align. That outcome became inevitable, measurable, procedural, and entirely detached from emotion, star power, reputation management, or any carefully curated celebrity persona. Her own meticulously detailed narrative had, in essence, created a cage of unassailable facts.
I would push back when needed. I would support when needed. The film and was always my top priority. Your version of the film was the top priority. I led hiring a new intimacy coordinator and doubles to help block the scenes. My God, it keeps going. And then I can't even read it all, guys. Then she goes into post. I spent a minimum of 10 hours a day every day since April on this film.
Even in post-production, Blake Lively claimed total command. She stated, "I spent a minimum of 10 hours a day every day since April on this film." People who trust the process do not submit manifestos. People who have a strong record let others speak for them. This letter did the exact opposite. It over-explained. It overwhelmed. It insisted. The underlying message was unmistakable. She believed her identity alone should close any discussion. That belief is now indelibly documented in writing, forming a critical piece of evidence against her own claims of powerlessness and exclusion.
If by chance you're like, oh my God, if I could go 2 weeks earlier, that would actually be great, then amazing. Selfishly, what I would love about that is that, Ryan and I have also been really stressed about spending a month apart. The most we've ever done is less than 2 weeks. I was talking to Ryan and I was like, I don't know if we should share this, but he was like, you guys have such a great trust.
The letter itself was long, dense, repetitive, and overwhelmingly self-focused. It read less like a formal submission to a guild and more like a personal declaration of her supreme importance. Page after page centered on her singular effort, her unique sacrifice, her indispensability, and her exclusive vision. This is not how someone confident in their case writes. It's how someone desperately pleads while pretending not to. This is where entitlement stopped being a mere accusation and became undeniable evidence, cemented by her own tone and precise wording, unprotected by any publicist's spin.
Defining note, if you will, a confirmation from the producers union to sort of say, yes, we confirm you actually have done this work. And it also, I think, allows you to get into more award contention, etc. But from everything I've talked to, my experts and people who are really in the industry who know about it day to day, it's basically just a big country club.
The industry didn't turn on her. She meticulously documented herself. There was no secret leak required, no enemy needed to twist context. She submitted this letter voluntarily, put her name on it, and asked for it to be considered. The idea that this is cancel culture collapses under these basic facts. Cancellation implies an external force, a mob turning against someone. This situation, however, was a clear case of self-submission. The more accurate question became, who did she think would never read it? Studios read everything, guilds archive everything, and lawyers dissect everything.
That evidence is now in the record, and at trial, that evidence will be presented.
Okay, cool. So nice talking to you. Not talking to you. This is so sad. This is my social interaction these days, just talking into voice memos.
Sony's silence after this bombshell wasn't support, it was a calculated strategy. They stopped talking because any public statement would inevitably mean confirming what the damning paper trail already showed. Silence became the safest, most risk-averse option. They privately distanced themselves, with internal communications revealing disbelief, frustration, and significant concern about exposure. There was no longer any incentive to defend her publicly. Loyalty does not survive legal risk, and studios invariably protect their brands, not individuals. Once the risk profile flipped, any attachment ended abruptly. Publicly supporting Blake Lively now would mean Sony inheriting her problematic paper trail. It would force them to defend statements that directly contradicted their own internal testimony and evidence. It would mean explaining why they allowed a situation they privately mocked and considered insane. This was simply not going to happen. So Sony will do what major studios always do in such situations. They will say as little as possible, maintain a neutral public stance, and allow the legal process to run its course. This isn't punishment, it's a textbook case of ruthless risk management. When the cost of defense dramatically exceeds the cost of distance, distance wins every single time. That devastating evidence, her own words, is now formally in the record. At trial, that evidence will be presented, cold, hard, and undeniable. Her lawsuit will not be judged by public opinion or celebrity status. Courts do not care about vibes, they weigh documents. Evidence always beats emotion. Her own words, captured with timestamps and her signature, contradict her lawsuit in every fundamental aspect, creating an insurmountable hurdle for her legal team. Blake Lively described undeniable authority while simultaneously alleging powerlessness. She meticulously outlined total control while claiming marginalization. She documented detailed decision-making at every stage, yet argued for her exclusion from the process. These contradictions are not rhetorical. They are measurably, undeniably real. Sony didn't expose her. The media didn't fabricate this narrative. Opposing counsel didn't invent the claims. She wrote it, submitted it, and preserved it herself. Once unsealed, it stopped being her story and became the immutable, devastating public record. Perhaps the most damaging part of the entire letter is how calmly she articulated her total control. She listed meetings, hires, extensive rewrites, marketing calls, and personal approvals like a resume for running an entire studio operation. Then, in the same breath, she turned around and asked courts to believe she had absolutely no leverage. How could this make any sense when her own detailed letter placed her firmly in charge of everything? She clearly assumed her prestige and celebrity would shield her from such intense scrutiny, an assumption that spectacularly collapsed the moment her letter became irrefutable evidence. This letter, crafted by Blake Lively herself, handed Sony and the court a clear, unmistakable map of authority. It provided the ultimate explanation for why executives privately rolled their eyes in their internal messages. This is precisely why her defense strategy rapidly shifted from confident explanations to desperate silence. Silence became the only safe option when her own words had already done all the talking, and none of it was in her favor. She wasn't exposed by rivals or tabloids. She personally mailed the proof herself and asked powerful people to read it. That was the moment Hollywood stopped defending and started stepping back. Once that paper trail exists, loyalty vanishes fast. This entire case now lives in indelible ink with precise timestamps and damning signatures. Feelings, outrage, sympathy, or carefully managed reputations simply do not survive such an environment. Blake Lively's letter ensured that, cementing her fate on the record forever. At this stage, outrage is irrelevant. Sympathy is utterly irrelevant. Reputation management means nothing. What truly matters is consistency, and in her case, that consistency is utterly gone. This case now lives on paper, and paper simply does not care who you are. The consequences are now unavoidable.